Welcome to Focus Diaspora. This is the first of a series that will discuss issues that face Kenya from the perspective of Kenyans in the U.S. Kenyans in the U.S. have, in the last, since the passing of the new constitution, have been elevated in their thinking about what happens in Kenya. And this program is going to focus on those issues that affect our lives on every day, those issues that concern us as Kenyans living abroad. We are sitting here in a beautiful restaurant, the Swahili Village. This is where Kenyans congregate to come and have ugali, nyama choma, samaki, all the dishes that are typical of Kenya. And in this program today, I'm glad and I'm very happy to introduce to you three wonderful ladies, all Kenyans, and all of them concerned about Kenyans and Kenyans in the diaspora. To my immediate left is Mkawasi Mcharo Hall. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
And Jeanette Nyawara.
Good evening.
And Njogu?
Regina.
Regina Njogu.
Good evening.
Now, these three ladies have been here in the U.S. And Mkawasi you're in leadership and you're in conflict management. That's what you do on a daily basis?
That is what I have done as part of my work in the U.S.
Okay.
Mostly I am involved in community affairs, diaspora community affairs. By profession, I'm a playwright and director. I run my own production company called Balozi Productions.
Okay, wonderful. And Junie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I am in IT and also in defense engineering with one of the bigger organizations here in America, Northrop Grumman, and we work very closely with the Defense Department. I am the co-founder and organizer for Kenyans for Justice. Mm-hmm. This is a group that came together and we actually help out the diaspora and also kind of bring peace in Kenya after the post-elections. And I'm also involved in a couple of charity work as well.
Wonderful. And Ms. Regina, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a Kenyan trained and US trained lawyer. I'm an immigration law attorney here in the US. I'm particularly involved in issues pertaining to dual citizenship and voting rights of diaspora Kenyans, among other social justice issues.
Now, as I said earlier, there's been a very heightened recognition of Kenyans in the diaspora. Right. And especially after the passing of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It has allowed for dual citizenship.
That's right.
It has allowed for the possibility of Kenyans participating in Kenyans abroad participating to a greater extent in the electoral process. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there's even talk about Kenyans in the diaspora being able to vote as absentees. Now, the very first thing that we would like to talk about is how you being involved here with the Kenyans and you're involved with the KCA, that's the Kenyan community abroad. When do you hear people talk about this? What is your take on all that?
Well, for one, we're excited about the new constitution and the fact that we are now becoming fully recognized in Kenya. Right now, as far as the voting rights go, we know that we have to vote in the coming elections. The biggest fear right now and what people are really talking about is how this is going to be implemented, and hopefully it's going to be implemented sooner so that it doesn't happen that they are only going to give us the right for just one or two people to vote. Because in the Constitution right now, they just allow for progressive registration of Kenyans abroad, which in essence, IEBC can get away with just giving Kenyans abroad, just a few of them, the means to vote, as long as they show that they have opened up the doorway to progressively register Kenyans abroad so that they can vote. But then we are saying that is infringing on our rights, because we have thousands of Kenyans in the diaspora, and you have to provide as much as possible a way for the majority of them to vote, if not all of them.
Because right now they're only talking about the voting. So far what I've heard is that the voting will be in the main cities, for example, D.C., where there are Kenyan consulates, in D.C., New York, and of course California, Los Angeles. Now, right there immediately, there's a question of access. Not all Kenyans live within the proximity of those areas. What do you see as a big issue with that, really?
I'm going to actually let Regina
Okay.
answer that question, and then I have a question regarding the...
Thank you. I think the position of the IEBC chairman, Isaac Hassan, right now is that diaspora Kenyans are going to vote. They are only going to vote for the seat of president, and they are going to vote from the embassy and the consulates. For us here in the U.S., it means we are going to be able to vote from Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles. The position of many Kenyans in the U.S. is that that is not good enough, even in terms of the fact that the Constitution provides for progressive rights. That's not progressive enough, even for this cycle of elections. And what Kenyans in the diaspora are clamoring for is, I think most Kenyans in the diaspora, first of all, do agree that we can only vote for the seat of president. However, in terms of access to voting stations, the embassies and the consulates are not enough. By way of example, I would say, for instance, if you had a voter in Turkana, and you required them to travel to Kitale to vote.
Right there is, you're disenfranchising them right there.
Correct. And you know very well they do not have the means to travel to Kitale within a day and vote and come back.
Right.
For me, that's tantamount to denying them a right to vote.
So in essence, they'll be denying a lot of Kenyans in the U.S. the right to vote.
Correct, because if you're requiring Kenyans from Dallas, Texas, which is about 10 hours away or more, from Washington, D.C. and New York, to travel from all that far to come and vote, and you know very well that's not logistically possible, and you've done your homework, that's for the IEBC, and so that's tantamount to denying them the right to vote.
Okay. Jude.
I also just wanted to bring that this is one of the issues that impacts somebody like me, and we're having that discussion with Virginia where I cannot vote because I've lost my rights as a Kenyan, and then I have to regain my citizenship as a Kenyan.
And that's a big issue because a lot of Kenyans in the U.S. and elsewhere have taken citizenship in other countries.
Yes.
Now the requirement is that you now have to first apply to be reinstated, and then you can vote.
Right.
Is there the time period by the time you apply for reinstatement and the time you get back the citizenship, does that allow enough time for preparation to actually vote?
Well, we all know the speed in Kenya that totally impedes even the process of you voting or getting your papers in time to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
I'd like to say something more. I think listening to everything that Kenyans here say and the response of Kenyans in Kenya, there's a big misunderstanding as to how Kenyans in the diaspora really live, because you hear a lot of Kenyans back home saying we are behaving like spoiled brats, saying that we are being allowed to vote in the consulate and we are complaining about that. Now, Regina mentioned the distance aspect, and that is very valid. They have to understand that. And also, the aspect that when IEBC says that it is okay for the ambassadors to be the returning officers, you know, you have to question yourself. That is really backward thinking, and you have to challenge that, because we think of the way back during the Mlolongo time when Mlolongo was introduced. That was one of the most archaic and primitive ways and controlling systems that were produced, because at that time the provincial administration is the one that was in charge of the voting, and you have the provincial administration saying, which is a government arm, saying, oh, so and so has won, even if that person has the shortest line. And actually, it is transferring the same system where you have the government arm being in charge of the voting. So you have to challenge that question. So for Kenyans to say that we are behaving in a spoilt way, they really have to think seriously about the integrity of the system.
So is there a short-term solution to this? Because again, we saw the Sudan, you know, last year when Sudan nationals voted in the U.S., they used churches, schools, and whatnot. And one can argue that maybe Sudan, being a new nation, and there's a lot of focus in Sudan at the time, and therefore there was a lot of money coming into Sudan. But I think because Kenya has been seen as the the safe haven, or not really safe haven, but the most secure place in East Africa. I think it looked that way for a very long time. Isn't this something that maybe could be an incentive to promote it and therefore have sponsorship in all the places?
Well, in Kenya, we have always claimed to be the most dynamic and most progressive country in the Eastern African region.
Right.
If we are so, how can Southern Sudan beat us? It does.
But that's the argument is that Southern Sudan is a new country, and they, all the governments were eager to support that process.
Well,
which is different from the Kenyan.
As a new country, they deserved all the support that they got.
Right.
We are not a new country. We've been at it for many years, so we should be able to do it for ourselves. And by the way, following the model of Southern Sudan, using churches, using schools, and using International Organization for Migration, that's nothing complicated. We can always follow the same model and be successful at it.
Now, as a lawyer, do you see a problem with the challenge of the results if it's maintained that they only use the three locations, that is DC, New York, and Los Angeles, LA? Do you see that as a possible legal issue?
Absolutely. Why do I say this? Because we well know who is at the Kenyan Embassy in DC and Los Angeles Consulate and New York. And I don't know about the specific logistics, how these votes are going to be transported into Kenya and how the integrity of the vote is going to be protected.
Exactly.
But the purpose of an election, and in order to have a fair election, not only does it need to be fair, it needs to appear to be so.
Fair. Yes.
So also the appearance is important. It might be fair, but the appearance will not seem to be fair.
And I think that's a very valid question. And the point that you brought earlier on, the embassy is a representation of the current government. So how can one, the perception is very important, that then how can one trust the returning officer being an ambassador?
The integrity of the vote.
Well, I will say this lastly, that fortunately I think there's a check and balances to that. Why? Because every party will have agents at the polling stations. So if the voting is done at the Kenya Embassy in DC, there'll be a PNU agent, there'll be a URP agent, and all other parties' agents, Wiper and ODM. And the votes will be counted at the station before they are transmitted to Nairobi. So to some extent, there is some kind of checks, because if the agents at the station certify that there were this number of votes for this party, and when they get to Nairobi the number changes, then that can be challenged. So I think to some extent we also do have to realize that there's some integrity in the system.
Okay. June?
Yeah, go ahead.
And anything to add on that?
Well,
from the again, You've been involved in this political process for a while. I remember the march in downtown Washington, D.C.
Right.
after the post-election violence came up, and you were one of the people leading the march and say we want justice, fair, and whatnot.
Right.
Now, the issues of fairness here and the appearance of fairness
Yeah.
being achieved. What would the organization, think about whatever is right now and disenfranchising people because of distance, because of the expense that they have to go through, somebody has to travel, and knowing the life here, which is very hectic in terms of vacation time. You have to take vacation if you have to travel.
Right.
How is that going to impact, people here?
Well, I mean, generally we know, especially like we work around the clock, like the Americans call it 24/7. And, the diaspora people really, like just putting 3 stations, I think is quite unfair. I think there should be an online maybe, process, to do this. But overall, I think the transparency and the fairness of it, so that we are sure that these votes are not rigged. I think the international community should get involved.
And
anything that you would like to add on that, Mshara?
Well, I would like to say, hopefully, finally, is that there always needs to be a point of action when people hear you talk. They ought to take you seriously when you have a point of action.
Okay.
And actually, the diaspora has been doing a lot behind the scenes to make sure that their right to vote is going to be put in place.
Okay.
And one of the things we have been doing is that we've been preparing ourselves to actually go to court and challenge the fact that we are being told that we are only going to vote in 3 places, and that our returning officers are going to be the ambassadors.
So we are right to say the IEBC, be warned.
Be warned. Be warned. And our chief organizer is right here. When she calls for a demonstration, we'll be there with her.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Sure.
On the issue of diaspora and rights to vote, I think the key word or the buzzword that's going to be the main word that the judges and everybody is going to struggle to define effectively is progressive. So we are going to court. Yes, we can go to court.
Yeah.
But what does progressive rights to vote mean?
Okay.
I think the whole issue is going to turn onto the meaning of that word.
Wonderful. And with that, we're going to take a quick short break, and we'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to look at, again, we talked about the new constitution making the Kenyans in the diaspora being very active. Lately, there's been issues about, I think, the remittance. We're going to talk about the remittance. We're going to talk about the economy and things like that. So when we come back, we'll pick up from there.